Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Mental. Just a reminder that this podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. I know they are hard to find, and I get that. I have a bunch of resources on my website if you need them, but I am not your clinician. I am a psychologist, but I am not your psychologist. So if you need any specific help, please look for the help of a licensed mental health professional. Learn all you can learn from the podcast. Enjoy the episode. What's up, y'all? So I'm so happy today to be joined by Dr. David Johns. He is the CEO and Executive Director of the National Black Justice Coalition, aka the NBJC, a civil rights organization for Black LGBTQ plus and same gender loving people and those living with HIV and AIDS. Appointed by President Obama, he was the first Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans from 2013 to 2017. He also served as a Senior Education Policy Advisor in the Senate and as a Congressional Black Caucus Foundational Fellow. He holds a PhD in Sociology and Education Policy from Columbia University, where he also earned his master's and bachelor's degrees. His accolades include, and there are many, the Active Advocate Award at BET's Black and Iconic Celebration, the Out 100 list, the Root 100 list, Ebony Powers 100, and an Early Career Award from Columbia University. So we are so happy to have him today. Okay, in your view, what is the fundamental difference between activism and organizing? Because you do both. So you're the perfect person to ask.
Both and. I don't know about perfect. There are no perfect people. Shout out to
oh my gosh. Don't listen. No disclaimers. My goodness. Lord.
So let me say this. They are complementary tools, and they're important ways that people can work together to ultimately create change. Again, they complement one another. So I think I've been thinking about this in the way that I would explain this to my students if I were still teaching kindergarten or third grade. So here we go. Activism, think alliteration. Activism primarily refers to actions that people can take. Often they're individual and or isolated, but they're actions that people can take to raise awareness, build a campaign, or otherwise invite people into acknowledging a particular injustice or opportunity or problem, however you want to frame it. I think that we benefit by using asset-based frames, so let's name things as opportunities. They're often issue-oriented and can take various forms, as we're having this conversation. Brother Byron Rustin, the chief organizer and architect of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, is over my shoulder. And he introduced to us a lot of these tactics, which includes protest. A lot of people now use digital media as a tool to engage in activism, writing letters or op-eds or video op-eds, boycotts or direct action. All of those things fall under activism. Organize can use those tactics, but is really about building a structured movement that includes a group of individuals. Co-conspirator would be a good word that comes up here, but I'm challenging myself because we just published an episode of my podcast, Teach the Babies with Dr. Chris Emden, and he challenged me to think about not using words that are sometimes perceived as dark or nefarious to talk about our work. But the definition of like co-conspirators, or the root essence of it, really refers to people who are committed to a particular action. Organizing tends to be more process-oriented and relational. So again, it involves working with people, often over a defined period of time or prolonged period of time. And it includes grassroots efforts that are like community meetings. Those might be digital or in person, thinking about how we organize now. Training, a lot of the work of NBJC includes organizing in this way, training to build compassion and to build capacity so that people can engage elected and appointed leaders or challenge people who are hearing misinformation and disinformation and acting upon it, including by expressing rage. And the goal there is really to build people's capacity so that they can engage in this work of addressing systemic root causes. So again, activism is typically more immediate, focusing on raising awareness or pushing for change around a specific issue, while organizing is a systemic approach to building community strength and capacity to enact long-term social change. If I were teaching kindergarten, I would say it like this to my babies, right? So activism is like shouting out loud about something important that you really care about. So our voices are important. They're one of the ways that we communicate our dreams and desires for changes that enable us to thrive. So imagine seeing one of your friends being mistreated at school. You might decide to tell everyone what's happened, get a big group of friends to hold signs, raising awareness of that injustice. That is activism. So people who protest or raise awareness about issues like bullying or climate change are activists. On the other hand, organizing is becoming a captain or a leader of an organization where your goal is to bring people together to make lasting change. So it's not just about that shouting or raising awareness for the day, but it's about creating a plan to help your group or your team work together over time toward a shared goal, right? So if the goal is to ensure that the school or community or environment is one that is safe and supportive and welcoming of everyone, then you and your friends can sit down and talk about what changes you want to see. You can develop a plan. You can have meetings with your classmates and other educators. You can make protests. You can make posters. You can also engage in protests to explain your ideas and let everyone know what they can do to be a part of the solution. And so it's important to get people's attention, but then thinking about a strategy for inviting people into problem solving so that the solution is sustained over time requires organizing. Does that make sense?
Hey, everyone, just a reminder that Mind Your Mental is not just a podcast. It is also a amazing community, if I do say so myself. It's phenomenal. I mean, you get more access to me. What more could you want in this life? So if you want to join the community, if you're not already on the community, go to my social media. My social media is the same, Raquel Martin, PhD, and DM me the word community so you can get details on joining this amazing flipping community. You get more access to me, y'all. Like, I'm a delight. All right. Hope to see you there. That makes perfect sense. And I think when I think of the report that you sent over, the Ring the Alarm, the crisis of Black youth suicide in America, and the fact that so many people don't realize that suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 19. Suicide, and it's stated that suicide rates among Black youth rose significantly from 2017. I remember reading a research study from the CDC like 2 or 3 years ago. And it mentioned that suicide rates had decreased.
Yeah.
For Americans. And I remember doing a post on it because I was just like, oh, that's not possibly true. You know, I'm still practicing. I'm like, the suicide rates haven't decreased. So then when I read the report, when you look at the data versus like different races and ethnicity.
Of course, when you disaggregate the data,
it was increasing. Suicide rate for Black youth was actually steadily increasing.
Of course.
And I used it as a teaching point for my students, right? About the fact that like data is just data. That's why when people are like, numbers don't lie, they sure do. I don't know why people say that. I always say data is just data. But if we were zoomed out, we would have thought, oh, suicide rates for Americans is decreased. So that clearly means Black Americans too. And when we zoomed in, it's like it's been steadily increasing. I think it's so important because we're in the social media age where people will say research. And I'll be like, where's the citation? Because there's no way for me to know what you're saying is actually what came out. Right. And it's so important specifically with this report and all reports, because like there's still a myth that Black people do not commit suicide. And not only are they committing suicide, the numbers haven't even stabilized. It's steadily increasing. So if you had to think about this in terms of the realm of like activism as well as like organizing, where do you think we need to, what are examples of things that, say, individuals who are listening that they can do on the activism side and on the organizing side to help out with this in particular?
This being the mental health crisis facing our community generally and Black youth more specifically? Yeah, I appreciate the question. So let me back up first and name something I struggle with, which is that a lot of the data that we have access to was collected before COVID, the most recent pandemic sponsored by the novel coronavirus. And I say that because as a sociologist, also as a researcher like you, I know that life markers are important. And we in the United States tell children to organize their lives around key moments, including graduations and milestone markers like that, or prom, being able to go to college, and if you're incredibly privileged, live on campus in a community. And for a generation of children, that was ripped from them, right? I still talk to parents who have children who have had developmental delays because they were denied opportunities to be in community with other children and practice the kinds of skills that children are typically able to learn in early care and education settings that they were prohibited from accessing because of not just the novel coronavirus, but the decisions that elected and appointed leaders made. I'm thinking explicitly about the failures made by Donald John Trump, who was occupying the Oval Office at that point in time. Mm-hmm. That's not the point. The point is that we should assume that any data around the ways in which children are ringing the alarm around the challenges they face and the needs that they have, including around mental health, are underreported.
Yeah.
One, if only because of the ways in which data is collected and the justifiable mistrust that most people, in particular Black people, should continue to have. But two, because we're also not taking advantage of tools like intersectionality to ask kids more thoughtful questions. After occupying the position of being appointed by President Barack Hussein Obama, his fabulous wife, Michelle Yvonne Robinson Obama, Sasha Malia, Grandma Robinson, rest in heaven, the dogs Sonny and Bo, to lead the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. After that was no longer an option, I went back to school to earn a PhD, in part because the largest data sets that are used to inform and fund public education throughout this country do not contemplate children as whole beings who might at some point not only declare a sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression that may or may not fall under the Liga Biga Tigga LGBTQIA+ umbrella, but more often it's the case that while they're developing, they are literally maturing in schools that they're forced to go to by law, often by decisions that their parents and legislators make, like that constrain the choices that they may or may not have. It's often children who are not performing expectations of gender that are marked and stigmatized, that are doubly affected by stigma and violence and discrimination, and offered up to adults who the data shows don't do a damn thing about it. This is our reality. I would offer an asterisk, again, acknowledging that you and I are having this conversation on the precipice of one of the most consequential elections in my lifetime. This is also acknowledging that since Donald John Trump had proclaimed his intentions to run for the presidency, coming down that gold elevator, there have been reports of students and educators reporting increases in violence and hostile climates and the kinds of experiences that increase suicidal ideation and completion. And I just posted a video about data that was collected to highlight the correlation between the increase in legislation targeting trans children. The last legislative cycle was one of the deadliest. I'll come back to deadliest. It was one of the most dangerously prolific with regard to anti-LGBTQ legislation, at or near 600, depending on how you count. The vast majority of those bills targeting students, trans students in particular. There's now data that shows that this increase in legislative targeting that is animated by folks like Mark, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, the Black man who stood in the pulpit of a Black church and called LGBTQ kids filth, only later for us to find out that he is on Beyonce's internet, cheating on his wife, doing all kinds of things that just the 69 God, look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. But there's now a data that affirms the increase in this legislative terrorism is correlated with an increase in suicidality and completion, suicidal ideation and completion. And no one should be surprised if you live in a state like Florida or Texas or Virginia or insert your state here, where people are passing laws that prohibit you from accessing life-saving and affirming care, criminalize your parents or educators for creating environments that are safe and supportive for you to learn and grow in. The result of that is genocide, and they know it. And so I hope that that is an appropriate frame for all of us to look through, no matter how you enter this conversation or your relationship to children, regardless of how they identify or the systems that they're forced to move through. And I hope it's helpful in answering the question I heard at the beginning, which was like, what can people do who are interested in being activists? The first is to educate yourself. There were a number of song references that came to mind, but it's to increase your competence. It is to do what I imagine those who are your listeners and followers and people who support and engage with your work are naturally inclined to do, but it's to become better educated so you understand what's happening. It is to do the opposite of what the failed history teacher turned governor of Florida, Ronald DeSantis, wants us all to do, and it's to work woke. It is to celebrate the tradition of Black feminists and always understand how the matrix of domination is at play, the signs, systems, and symbols that allow white supremacy to be omnipresent yet hyper invisible. Knowing all of this is the first foundational step to doing anything. And Dr. Martin, here's why this is important. I very much appreciate you posted a video. You and I exchanged messages about this some time ago that named this hypocrisy is not quite the right word, but it's the one that's coming to me in this moment. But the hypocrisy of like wanting, expecting, needing Black men to be emotive, to acknowledge that we have emotions and to name them and share them, but then calling us sassy when we do so, regardless of our sexual orientation or gender expression.
Yeah, I told my students that, and I recorded myself doing a lecture over it because these two students in my class that was Psych of the Black Experience, they was getting on this dude, and they stayed like messing with him. So he popped back. That's good right. One too.
Of course it was.
And they said, "Oh, he's sassy." I said, "What?"
Right.
I said, "Why is he sassy?" I said, y'all been on him. Now, mind you, this is towards the end of the semester. I'll never forget. I was like, y'all, we've been having class for like 10 weeks, man. Like, he really just be, yeah. And he's sassy. And I was like, and I recorded it. I got to find the lecture too. Cause I was like, you'll say you want men to share stuff, share emotions, but what you really mean is tell me how much you like me and be very specific about it. Like, or tell me your emotions. And then if you share it, it's like, no, I didn't mean that one. I meant all the pleasant ones. Right.
That's right.
And it's just this, like I have two boys, and it's funny because whenever I post something specifically about Black men, Dr. Johns, I always get like a whole thing about saying that, like, what about Black women?
Of course.
And I'm just like,
as if you don't live your life as a Black woman and that your work isn't rooted in supporting all Black people, regardless of how we identify. Right.
Exactly. And I always say that anytime you hear me talk, I say he, she, they. What's best for Black people, what's best for Black women is best for the Black community. Black men, best for the Black community. Non-binary Black folk is best for the Black community because it's community.
It's
right?
the both and. Right.
It's the both and. But when people do that, and I'll just be like, are you serious?
But that reaction / that tactic is one of the easiest ways to do the master's work. It is one of the easiest ways to be a tool of white supremacy. And I bring this up because there's a video I'm going to share with you today that someone sent to me. I very much appreciate the person who sent it to me. And it's a brother who is similarly occupying this position where he doesn't have to be accountable for his ignorance. And the nigga's loud and wrong and is essentially saying, Black men get murdered. We get lynched for the way that we look, and gay niggas don't. It ain't never been no gay man and I'm like, okay, so aside from the fact that like there's an actual hate crime named after James Byrd Jr., a Black man who was lynched because he is a Black man who was queer. Yeah. In spite of the fact that there's a documentary about Ed Buck, a white man who terrorized and murdered Black queer sex workers in Los Angeles in the last 5 years, like in spite of the fact that like this is a historical truth, you get to claim ignorance in a way that allows you to avoid having to do the work of freeing your mind and engaging in white supremacy rehab to appreciate that none of us escapes the trauma associated with whiteness, white supremacy, and the terror and violence that comes with all of them. And so I'm spending a lot of time here because it is incredibly important for all of us to do the self-work. A doctor, mentor of mine, Dr. Yolanda Silly Ruiz, would say the archaeology of self, to be able to have a starting point to then do more. I said a lot there, so maybe let me pause and let that breathe.
Yeah, because you did say a lot. When you mentioned the aspect of never having the data accurate when it comes to suicidal behaviors, I also, and working in this realm as a psychologist, I always think that the data is never going to be right. One, because of the mistrust aspect of it. But two, I don't even think we identify the behaviors, right? Like if I have a patient and they're exhibiting like significantly risky behavior, but they're not saying they want to die. Mm-hmm. They can't see a future for themselves, but they're not saying they want to die. Mm-hmm. They're using substances every single second of the day, but they're not saying they want to die. Dealing with weapons every single second, but they're not saying they want to die. Have never even thought about themselves at the age of 20, but they're not saying they want to die. When we're talking about like ideation, I always feel like, if we expand the language to like, do they want to live, right? Like engaging in these behaviors where you can't see yourself in the future, using substance after like all these risky behaviors. And it's not that they don't see it as like not wanting to die. They see it as like, I mean, what else do I have but this? And I've always seen that as like, that to me, that's ideation. Like if you have that kind of vacant esteem, you can't see yourself in the future to the point where you're taking risk after risk after risk and don't even think twice about it. Right. I feel like the data of suicidality is never going to be accurate because people don't even expand it to that language. And that's more qualitative data. Like that's going to be like, you got to talk to them. It's not a search, like I like focus groups and interviews and honoring the narratives of the people who never got to talk in the first place. Like I'm all for that. But when I was talking about that, I was telling my students and telling people like the data is never going to be fully accurate, but it's also like, someone who's like that. You know somebody who's like that.
Right. Well, some of this is about the phrase you're using, is sitting with me. That is sitting with me is the data is never going to be accurate. There's a part of me, like the visceral thing that is bubbling up for me is like, what does that even mean, right? Like to your earlier intervention, data is but a tool. Anybody who's taken statistics knows that it is about how you leverage tools to manipulate information that you have access to, whether that is using numbers quantitatively or using qualitative tools like focus groups or narrative data collection. That's one. Next paragraph. I know, as you know, that data is often used as a tool to protect and further enshrine white supremacy, which is why they don't want us to fucking understand how to use the tool to dismantle the master's house. And the danger in the space that you and I occupy is that our ability to use data is often the thing that then is weaponized against us. When engaged in conversation with people who are committed to ignorance in the purest form of the term, it's simply them not knowing that which they do not know. Next paragraph. I think it is important for all Black people who love Black people, people who care about, appreciate, want to continue to enjoy the privileges that are afforded to most people in our very young and very fragile democracy, to simply be more aware of how whiteness as a construct and tools of white supremacy, including language, are used to divide and conquer us. Mm-hmm. Two quick examples. I, when teaching, would often ask my students to name all of the ways in which you can refer to a grown boy. And they would spend some time ruminating on it. And most often somebody would yell out or they would come to Mr. as the construct. Okay, run that for a grown girl. There are at least three ways to do that one. Miss, M-I-S-S, Miss, M-S, and then Mrs., M-R-S. Each of those terms aren't simply synonyms that don't have a meaning. They each have differing levels of privilege and access economically, socially, emotionally, politically, financially, all bound up in a European understanding of what it means to not only be a girl who gets to become a woman, but what woman means in relationship to a cisgender heterosexual man in a marriage that is recognized by the state. That's white people shit. That's white supremacy at work, right? Before that, if we think about Sambufu Some, who reminds us in chapter 13 of their book, The Spirit of Intimacy, in my village in West Africa, the words lesbian and gay did not exist, but the word gatekeeper did. And gatekeepers hold the space between the village and our ancestors. If we engage in white supremacy rehab, and remember that there are civilizations now where they don't have gender pronouns, where this he, she, they, all the stuff that like radical right-wing politicians are using to try and motivate voters in terms of scare tactics around trans people, fear-mongering, the kind of transphobia that gets Serena Williams, and I can't think of the boxer's name in this moment, but the boxer that hit the white woman so hard she called her a man, and like all of these things are by design. And if we engage in white supremacy rehab and remember and reclaim ways of being before white supremacy, it's easier for us to engage with each other without the language getting in the way. Similarly, to go back to the example that I offered up, which takes us back to where we were in terms of the challenges and not just youth, but Black LGBTQIA plus youth faces, if people appreciate that, like, my Africanness is queer in America, where whiteness is centered as the pejorative position of power. Like, us being Black is queer, just as my sexual orientation, being same gender loving, is queer. Those things are queer. We are queer. You as a woman is queer in a society that centers men. It is the case that because of how language works, people use queerness, which ontologically means that which is not in a position of pejorative power, to refer to those of us who are sexual minorities, but all of us are queer. All of us are minoritized. And if we start from that premise, it's easier to not only, I would argue, and my research has shown, it's easier to not only make sense of shared oppression, but it's also easier for us to understand organizing opportunities to work together to address the root causes of systemic and sustained oppression, regardless of how it manifests.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are the tools to start with to challenge that, to combat that aspect of maybe in the language, maybe in behaviors? Like, what would you say was the first place to start, simply, when it comes to combating this aspect of supremacy that is embedded in everything? And you can see it coming out in language. You can see it coming out in the way we engage with each other, the divisiveness and social media. And it very much is a tool, right? Like, if you ever want to know, why somebody wants to silence or divide you, you just have to think about who benefits from the lack of community within that group, right? Mm-hmm. Like, who benefits from that? What would you say is a recommendation, or multiple? Where do you start? Because it's everywhere. It's embedded. Like you mentioned, it's systemic. Where do you start? If you can recognize it. Say you can recognize it, but you're like, I see this. I see the fact that, like, I automatically default to this. I see the fact that, like, I just don't know where to start.
Yeah. 3 things. 1, I hope everyone hears my heart in everything I'm arguing, which is to say I appreciate you and recognize you and support you wherever you are, no matter how you enter the arena. By the arena, I'm referencing Teddy Roosevelt's speech about those of us who choose to do the work, whatever that looks like for you. That's 1. 2 is, I want to remind and affirm for everyone who's interested in doing more work that you should not do this alone. This, again, is why organizing is relational. There are organizations like NBJC, the organization I have the pleasure of quarterbacking. We are a 21-year-old civil rights organization that is at the intersections of racial equity and LGBTQIA plus equality, which are often still siloed in spite of increases in representational leadership. And so I want people to be aware of organizations that have always existed to help us in this regard, whether they show up in the form of griots or academics or educators, folks like yourself, folks who write books and who manage and run programs to help us make these critical connections, or they show up in the form of organizations like NBJC, for example. tools for activists that have been helpful. So I'm stepping back from the specific space we were just dwelling in around white supremacy and how it shows up in language and complicates our ability to show up for ourselves and others, to step back and just talk about tools generally. Let me know if that's not helpful or where you want me to go or grow. But tools for activist organizers include developing clear visions and goals, right? So starting with like a self-investigation of what you are interested in doing and desiring to know more is an important and clear goal, right? It's the pray a prayer for the ancestors to make clear to you all of that which you do not know in a way in which you can begin to digest and appreciate it and address it as so. That's one. The second is to build relationships. Again, organizing is relational. Being in community with people who have different experiences than you do enables you to do this work and challenge yourself to grow beyond the limitations of your own individual experience and schooling and the shaping that happens ecologically based on how you come into this world and who you come into it through. This is an acknowledgement that my favorite First Lady, Michelle Obama Robinson Obama, would often say that in our country, it is still the reality that you can predict a child's life outcomes by and large based on code, genetic code and zip code. Tell me who a child was born to, phenotypically, and a couple of other demographic factors that often show up in what zip code they were born into. And we can predict most of their life outcomes, or at least their trajectories, based on data, right? And so being in community with folks who can help sharpen and challenge and grow and support you and whatever your goal is an important tool. Assessing this is to supplement both of those things, assessing what you need, what you have, and who can help you fill the gaps between the two of those things so you can grow is incredibly important, right? A needs assessment, regardless of what your organizing goals are, is foundationally important. Recruiting people to support you in your campaign, regardless of what your goal is, whether it is to grow as an individual or to address a systemic problem connected to white supremacy, is another important tool. White supremacy has us lying to ourselves, thinking that we can be successful alone. That is a lie from the pit of white supremacy hell. What most African folks know is that we grow further, faster together. So recruiting people to support you in this work is incredibly important. That's why thinking about the experiences of descendants of Africa and the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy, acknowledging that we're not post anything, let alone racial trauma, it's important to not only take things to the altar and have spiritual and ancestral counsel, but to have a counselor like you who's certified and trained and can provide resources and tools, and to have a good group of friends who can counsel you, whether it's playing spades or engaging in medicinal forms of getting through, right? Being able to experience joy and dance and move for those of us who have the ability to do so. Like, recruiting folks to support us holistically is one of the ways in which we not only do this work, but we remain well while doing so. And then I think the last one is to create structures for action, right? So whether it is creating a group of folks that you can engage in meaningful and intimate discussion with about things you've learned, things that are challenging you, and growth areas, whether you call it an accountability group, a counseling group, or a group chat, creating that space is important. Identifying benchmarks that enable you to demonstrate your growth, right? So this is me needing to name the goal should not be wanting to become an ally of a community you might not be a part of. I'm talking to my cis heterosexual siblings to be clear. I don't want to make assumptions. If a doctor guessed at your birth, at your gender at birth, that's what a gender assignment is. It's a highly educated guess. if they guessed and how you identify at the point at which you are able to declare an identity, if it's consistent with that guess, you're cisgender. It is not a slur. That's all it means. If you don't, and the doctor made a different assignment than what you identify with in your body, you are trans. That's what those terms mean. So I'm talking to my cis and heterosexual, those of you who engage in strictly heterosexual sex. I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see, whatever that means. I'm talking to you all in part because pop culture has people thinking that they can watch RuPaul's Drag Race, download a Todrick Hall album, and quote some gay lingo, and now they're an ally, when the work is really about becoming an active accomplice, which requires you leveraging your privilege, having some skin in the game, and operating in ways that make you uncomfortable to create opportunities for others. And so the point I'm trying to make is to create structures for action that allow you to demonstrate to yourself and to others, to the extent that that's helpful and not performative, your growth. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that answered my question. It would be another conversation. I think one of the things that seems to be intimidating to a lot of people is like the data aspect of it, right? Like how to get involved and what it looks like. I find that to be kind of the most fun part of it, because I get to engage with people instead of like being in my hovel, looking at my laptop and going over it. But even when I talk to like colleagues and friends about it who are like in training, just the perception of just saying the word data, it just feels intimidating to some people.
So don't say data then. Let's acknowledge that. This is a part of me that's like, let's meet some people who have good intentions where they are, and acknowledge that like words matter, and to some extent they're immutable. So let's not call it data. Let's call it valuable experiences, or like, whatever it is, right? Like those of us who have the privilege of having access to jargon and tools that come with being a statistician or having a PhD who's demonstrated the ability to design and defend a research study, can more frequently speak to people in language that they understand. Again, Chris Imden, who talks a lot about hip hop as a language that educators can and should use, is entering this conversation with us. And so we can hold more, and let me know if I can help you, friend, leader, do more to hold space for folks who are understandably intimidated because of the ways in which white supremacy shows up in schools, to take out the genius of it all, until they can hold it for themselves.
Yeah, I actually said that to my patients, actually, when they're in a moment where they're like, they don't believe in themselves and they're having a tough moment. And I said, well, you know what? I'll hold that for you. Like, and you know what? It could be tough to always feel like you have to challenge and do the reframing, and it's like, well, you can feel exactly how you feel. I got it for you, so you don't have to worry about you. If you don't feel the energy to believe in yourself, I believe in you. Like, I got that for you. It's one of the most awesome aspects of me. I will always say it's an honor, like to be able to be a trusted space for people, because they could just as easily, especially given the stuff that a lot of people go through, just be like, I have no interest in trusting another person in life. And I would be like, you're right. Yep. Like,
right.
That's valid. that's valid to be like, I've been done so many times. I do think it shouldn't be, but it's novel to believe, right? Like when I'm dealing with people and they're like, well, how do you just not, there's so many scenarios that are exhausting and we're doing through the election and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know the future. I know it's kind of like what you said earlier, Dr. Johns. You said, Kamala said that when she was in a interview with Charlemagne. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Cut that out, my editor. I'm so sorry.
Why? Where were you about to go? I'm like, you about to get into it.
No, it's just, like, real talk though.
Always. Yeah, get into it.
I was having a conversation with somebody about Charlemagne the other day, and they were telling me that I was being too tough on this person. And here's my thing. When they were coming from, they had no idea that this person had an entire mental health organization.
Okay. Charlemagne is the person. Yep.
Yeah. And I said, here's the thing. I think that it's understandable, and it's also natural for people to evolve.
For quite some time. He's had this organization for quite some time, and they do things in meaningful ways, including around World Mental Health Day. Yep.
Exactly. And I think it's understandable that some people evolve past maybe what got them to where they are.
Yep.
Right. So the person who was having a conversation with me, and I'm like, Yeah, no, I'm not saying about who they are as like a shock jock. I'm saying who they are as the head of a mental health organization.
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, I didn't know they owned that. They had that." And I was like,
Not.
"Yeah. So what's your perception now about the way that narratives and conversations cause ripples within our community?" And I think that's what people don't get. I think that's what people don't get.
Don't want to, because here's the thing: Google works. Like, you provided information that's readily accessible for anybody.
Yeah.
A computer in there on their person that they can access. So some of this is also about us naming when people are willfully ignorant, especially about things that they otherwise can have access to.
Yeah, because I just, yeah. What was I saying? I just like certain stuff. There are certain things that I'm just like, I mean, everything is mental health and everything is well-being, but like, there's so many times where I'll see people in the space and it's just like, yeah, I totally get mental health and well-being is everything. And I want you to get that I do this. So,
yeah.
Like, this is legit what I do.
Yeah.
So
you do sacred work and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, so I just be like, let's be honest and be open about the fact that we can evolve past different things. The things that got us to a certain stage may not be the things that get us to the next one. Right?
Yeah, we got you here. That's the name of the book.
We evolve, right? And some things are going to have to be left behind. I am like very much like an East Coast Philly person. My attitude was abhorrent coming up.
Okay.
Like,
based on whose metrics? Based on what and whose metrics?
The world. Ain't a word alive that wouldn't say that I wasn't.
Are you sure? Are we sure about this? Have we?
Yeah, I used to just be a butt for fun. Like, it used to just be fun to me.
Okay.
That's why when people be like, I mean, you don't get it. I had this one student who was just like, Dr. Martin, you're book smart, but I'm street smart. And I'm like, yeah, because I was
fool you, beloved.
Honey, I said, yeah, because I was born a doctor. I'm gonna let you have that, but honey, no. Like, that's why when people like, oh, it's so hard for me not to, pop off. Me too. Rage is simmering pretty easily. So like, if you get to be mad, I get to be mad. My turn. Me next.
It's an emotion I get to experience. It's one of the reasons I appreciate your anger translator video. I don't have that. I don't have to do it. I just let it out. I just pop off in real time.
I'd be like, it's right there. You think it? Oh. You think it's fun to be an adult? Do you know the amazing insults that are in my head daily? But no, I have to be an adult.
About young people in particular, because I pop off on adults mostly. I have more patience.
Patient children. I always say, like, y'all should be happy that I see you guys as kids, because adults don't get the same
grace.
No, kids, you're a kid. Yeah, okay. Well, let me explain it to you again. Let me provide you with a resource. Let me make this a teacher moment, because everything's a teacher moment. I mean, that's why people don't really that's why I try to tell people, like, the aspect of adultification, the reason why it's violence, right? Like, the same way you mentioned, people don't realize that, like, not teaching our education or not doing these things, that's violence. If we can objectively state that teaching people about their history, normalizing their experience, making sure that their culture is not the elective, the core curriculum. If we can say that is something that builds whole, functioning, healthy, happy, developmentally appropriate young children, then anything opposite than that is violence, and it's intentional.
Yep.
It's violence, right?
By Ronald DeSantis and the Republican Party and Greg Abbott. And that's exactly right. Let's name a thing, beloved, as Iyanla would say.
Yeah, it's a violence. So that's why when I'm just like, when you think of adultification, I want you to think about the way we treat children. Yeah. And then think about it opposite wise, right? Think about it that way. Like, oh, I don't want to be an adult. Why? More responsibility. People don't explain stuff to me. I get expected to do more. I expected to know more. I get stuff explained less. Okay. And now think about the fact that when does that start? As early as 5, I believe. How do you think that contributes to the development of people? And it goes back to when you mentioned the aspect of Black men being emotive, right? People will be like, I get all these conversations. How do we make more Black clinicians available? I said, 1, it's money. But 2, I said, what if I told you it's not solely the aspect that we need more Black clinicians? What if it's also the aspect that we shouldn't expect only Black clinicians to be able to work with Black people?
That part. What if we required the vast majority of non-Black clinicians to be what? Culturally competent. That part. Because by sheer mathematical permutations,
There's less of us, right? And people just go straight to, well, let's do all this. And I'm like, yeah, right? But I kind of feel like this is another way you putting it on us.
Always.
When it's not solely about Black clinicians. It's about why are Black clinicians, what about the aspect of everyone should be able to practice from an aspect of cultural humility? Everybody should have books and education that centers people that don't look like them. Everyone should.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm always just like, and people, I just always be like, you just put another thing on us. It's like imposter syndrome. I ain't meet many Black people that have imposter syndrome. I met a lot of Black people who have a justified reaction to an oppressive environment, though.
Come on, framing. Yep.
Why would you feel like you belong when why would you not feel like an imposter for the place that they tells you that they reject you overtly, covertly?
For you to feel that very way. Yep.
That's why I'm like, imposter syndrome. Every single time I say that, like, I've never met a Black person who's had imposter syndrome. I've seen people who have a justified reaction to an environment that's making them feel like they don't belong.
Yeah.
Why would they feel like they belong when you're telling them that they don't?
I love that. Yep.
And it sounds crazy. They're like, what do you mean? No. And plus, if you go back to the research of what imposter syndrome research was done based off of European American middle to upper class women who were struggling with grad school and they were like, they were second guessing themselves in grad school. And I'm like, right.
How about that? So,
I'm like, okay. And yeah, they made, but even that, I'm like, in that environment, just like you mentioned, the queerness, I love that. They're queer in that aspect of academia.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So they even think it's imposter syndrome. I'm like, or are you having a justified reaction to a misogynistic environment that doesn't even want you to be there?
That's right. Not designed for you. It's
not designed for you. So half the time I'm like, I can't stand that term. Like, because if you say imposter syndrome, a lot of times people will go to, well, let's work on that within yourself. But if you're saying a justified reaction to an oppressive environment, then the action is the environment.
Yep.
And I always feel like I'm like, I don't like that word. I mean, like, let's focus on why are they feeling like an imposter? Oh, well, we have these policies that don't make them feel welcome. So what do we change? Do we change them or the policies? Do we ask them to leave?
Yeah, it's a way to circumvent the accountability around the structure, the root cause. Again, a way to avoid dealing with the root cause. Yep.
You got a house phone?
I do an office phone. Yep. Talk about adultification.
A real one? Nuh-uh. Let me see it. Shut up! No, you don't. Oh, is that a Logitech? No, you don't. Yeah, you have a...
I got a cordless and I got one with a cord too.
Oh my God, you're such an adult. Oh my gosh.
Again, the consequences of what? The pandemic.
Shut up. A cordless phone and a corded one? Wow, I feel like such a little kid now. I don't feel like I'm...
Well, you are grown. You're responsible for living, breathing humans. You are definitely an adult.
Listen, but still, every time I see these posts that they be like, I can't believe we the real adults, I feel it. Because I can't believe I'm the adult in the room.
Listen, my two of my dear friends, Brittany and Reggie, celebrated their 5th year wedding anniversary recently. And afterwards, the godparents got together just to continue, the after party. And another godparent said to his brilliant, beautiful, her name is Georgie. She has a podcast that everybody should download. I think it's Quiet Time with Georgie, Jorgie. She's the only Georgie out there. But Georgie, he was like, Georgie, do that thing. And we were like, nigga, did you become the uncle who
do that dance?
That's exactly right. He was like, Ed did. So...
Because it is cute. Because, well, first of all, once again, I must tell my story, then we'll wrap up. But Russell my oldest wants to be a firefighter for Halloween or whatever. Okay. And he had already told me he wanted to be a firefighter. But as soon as he told me that, I was like, oh, no, we got to get rid of this because he already has a firefighter costume in the house because we do imaginative play. So if he is a firefighter, we don't get to get a new costume. And by we, I mean me. Like,
I'm about to say, why are you not centering Russell's desire to be a firefighter? And you already have the costume.
So as soon as he said that, I was like, oh my God, let's just make sure you don't tell your dad. Because as soon as he tells my husband, because so they have their little nightly.
Daddy's gonna say done. Daddy's gonna be logical and rational, and what he's gonna be very logical, very rational, very demure, very
oh my
mindful.
gosh. They have their little talks every night. And when he came downstairs for this talk,
okay,
he said, oh, well, Russell said he wanted to be a firefighter. Oh. And I was like, yeah, but he said, and that means
he's gonna be
we don't get a new costume. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I deserve to see him in cute stuff, a new outfit every year. I see him in a firefighter costume.
Why does it have to be for Halloween? Or
because I get to
be a firefighter.
I don't know. I see him in that costume Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It's the 31st. I want something different.
Ooh, that's not what he wants. And
I deserve.
You can get a costume for you. If you desire a costume, then you get one. You can even do a Beyonce and have costume changes if that makes your heart flutter.
It's not as cute.
You a lie. You are.
It's
you
not as cute.
Let Russell be the firefighter he want to be.
I was because I was just like, man, please.
We are. I appreciate this conversation because this is a through line between in this quote that we have been quoting together, and I appreciate that we can have it on this level because of the levity. But think about how often this dynamic shows up in the experiences of children, right?
Dr. Johns, I don't want it to be real. I just want to see him in something cute. And I deserve that. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about Russell. That little boy has had me fighting for my life these past couple of months. Okay. So you know what? All I want is to see you dressed up as something cute that'll just remind me.
Again, I receive everything you said, Dr. Martin.
This is my right as a mom.
You have said that you have been doing the work of being a parent to a child who did not ask to be born, and in exchange for doing said labor, you want to dress him up like he is a doll, a cute doll, not a actual person. I hear you, beloved.
I was really hoping that he wanted to be like, oh yeah. Oh, I'm aware of that. I was hoping he wanted to be like something in a suit. You know, like I really was hoping that he was going to. I don't know. I haven't seen him in a suit. I haven't seen him in a suit.
I am a grown adult. I pay lots of bills that I don't want to pay in residences that I don't occupy or otherwise dwell. I don't wear a suit. The day that I realized that the president that I work for, Barack Hussein Obama, didn't wear a suit and a tie, find a picture of me in a suit and tie.
You wouldn't say that if you saw our holiday photos. He's just so cute. It's basically been 10 months since I've seen his little cute face in a suit. Oh my gosh. And it was like a velvet blue.
I into the group chat because I pray for little Russell's freedom.
I just love seeing his little, oh my goodness. He has like he got like this Nike outfit. My mom got it for him and for my youngest, the 2-year-old. And I've been looking for weeks to find so we can match.
That's what this is about.
Because they're just, oh my goodness.
I'm gonna let you live for a little bit.
Oh my goodness. And like, just so cute. Just we all just be in our little green Nike sweatsuits.
All of y'all can now be in your fire department, or you can expand it and be emergency service providers in different iterations. Somebody can be EMS. I mean, there are lots of options. I'm here for Russell's imagination.
Is it imagination if you're wearing the same outfit that you wear on a random Wednesday?
Here's what I think about, and one of these things I miss is where's the picture? I taught kindergarten in New York City on 110th Street and Broadway, and my babies were forced to play in an area that is no bigger than the office I'm standing in now, in one of the most expensive districts in the country. And one of the things that I miss most is that in spite of the fact that my babies had the same physical confinement, the same tools, blocks, toys, every day they found some new world to dream of and envelop and enroll everybody else in. Mm-hmm. That one day the same block could be a car, that could be a rocket ship, that could be a computer, and that space could transform to meet whatever they felt in that moment. That kind of magical ability to create worlds is something that gets beaten out of us. So absolutely, yes, his ability to and desire to dwell and dream in whatever worlds being a firefighter is connected to, I'm sure exists in vivid technicolor. And my prayer for you, sister, is to be enveloped in it.
Dr. Johns, all
Ain't no
I
beauty in that
wanted, I
suit.
don't want no teaching moment. All I wanted to do is possibly see my son as a pumpkin, okay? Because they're cute. All
So
right.
you find
I didn't
another way
need a
to go
teaching
take that
moment.
pumpkin costume outside of Halloween because he's already made a decision.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find a way to sneak it in somewhere. Because as soon as I do that, Brandon's gonna be like, "So we just buy costumes for Tuesdays now?" Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's why he has the firefighter costume. I mean, because
every day we perform drag, whether it is the drag of being a student, the drag of being a professional, the drag of being
honey.
A work life. We all perform drag. What drag you gonna do on today? Yeah. So if you want to buy, listen. Buy whatever.
That's why we got the firefighter costume in the first place, because I'm like, we need some imaginative play. What are we going to be today? I just randomly got it. I was like, this is so cute.
It wasn't random. Look at the ancestors conspiring for his success.
You know what, Dr. Johns? This may have to be your last time here.
That's all right, as long as my brother gets the support, or my sibling gets the support that they need. I'm all right. I'm all right.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as soon as it was something that didn't require a purchase, he was gonna have his dad's 100% support. As soon as he came downstairs, I was like, man, why you tell him that, man?
You already knew.
I thought we still had time.
You already knew what was gonna happen.
Yeah, as soon as they be having their little conversations
again, and here's what is not lost on me. I'm just gonna name it and plant this seed. We'll water it later. Is that we could trace this conversation and layer on top of it a transparency for how similar it is to parents who struggle with, I'm not saying you're their friend, I'm just saying this is what is not lost on me, struggle with their children's pronouns or gender expression or identity in so many forms.
Yeah, I think so, because when I've had to work with parents on that, the biggest thing that we had to divorce them from is this perception of like, and everyone's not like this. Like everyone has their reasoning behind in their minds why they have this stronghold on them. But your children don't belong to you.
Why they refuse to let the dreams that they have dreamt for themselves through their children die.
Because that's the thing. It's like your children don't belong to you. I also feel like people really confuse legacy with lineage. And like your legacy is what you contribute to this world, but not as a person, right? Like my legacy is going to be hopefully the way I leave critical thinking skills in my students. My legacy is going to be if I one day write a book. My lineage is my children. That's just genetics, right? Yeah. But they're not my legacy. My legacy is my body of work. And I think a lot of times people will confuse legacy with lineage and just be like, well, they're my legacy. That's not true. Like I totally get you have all of these visions and thoughts and all of that when they're in your womb. But is it not just magical that they can come out and like crash every single one of those, and then you get a whole new person who get like it's an honor to see them from the beginning. Watching my child literally had to learn how to do the peace sign. Yeah. And the fact that like it's a new thing for him, and he puts it up in every single picture, and I got to watch him learn that.
And do too.
And he puts it in every picture, and it's so cute because I'll be like, picture, he'd be like, yep. But like people will see it as like, oh, it's my vision, and I see it as like, isn't it magical that like even the dreams that you have for that person, you could never. It was like that was like the baseline. They're coming out and they're like shattering but people don't see it that way. Like, yeah, I totally get it. I'm a parent. I have perceptions of what parenthood was going to be like. And then, you know what? Let's dance in the confetti of them crashing and burning that and being like, no, what if I told you it's 10 times better than that, Mom? You couldn't even dream of how flipping amazing I am. Like I just see it as more like, I get it. When I'm working with parents and, I'm like, I get it. But like, what if I told you like, that's like, some people say like my pregame is your workout. What if I told you like the way your perception of what you thought your child was going to be, that's like the baseline.
Yep.
Like that's like the warm up. You couldn't even there's no way you could possibly dream how amazing they are because the limit doesn't exist. You don't even you can't dream that way. You only have to see it. So I get it, but like,
Yes.
You know what?
And
I just wanted to talk about. Don't you talk? If you say anything.
no, I'm just
about
going
a
to affirm
firefighter.
that Jeff Johnson said this some time ago in a very different context. But like, this should be the dream of all parents, which is that your child's desires are beyond your wildest comprehension. Right? Like, how boring is it for our children to want to do and be the things that make sense to us? Our children challenging convention should excite us. At a minimum, it should compel us to interrogate the visceral response we often have, which is to squelch, quiet down, or dissuade children in particular from things that don't make sense to us.
I think interrogate is the perfect word. And I'm going to say this and I'm going to let you go after you tell everybody where to find you. I was talking to my husband the other day and I was like, I think that when you get to a space where people don't read, right? And especially read our history, I think it's very easy for people to forget how far we've technically come.
Yeah.
Like, I really, really do. Like, I think one of the reasons, like, why people won't interrogate or why people, like, make an assumption in this aspect of someone belonging to you. I mean, I know it sounds very basic, but I just think people do not realize how far we've come. Like, I think it's lost on you. Like, people who don't want to vote. And I'm just like, especially, Black people. Have you read Megger and Merle? People who, who are talking about like mental health and don't understand the connection between incarceration and mental health. Have you read Antonia Hilton's book? People who don't understand why the school system.
But often the answer is no, right?
Often the answer is no. And I think, I know I'm a huge nerd.
But even if they had, so what, right? Like the way that white supremacy is set up, most people don't have the luxury of one, reading or accessing those books. Think about the literacy rates that lead to a lot of the mental health outcomes that we've been talking about, regardless of identification or orientation. But even if people did, the way that like trauma and prolonged exposure to trauma and poverty and inherited trauma, the way that all of that is set up, people don't often have the luxury of making otherwise rational and informed choices that enable them to account for the information they might have encountered at some point. So even when we assume people have read those books, that they have the ability to remember and then apply the knowledge in real time, given all that we are faced with on any given day, let alone in this moment in our very young, very fragile geopolitical environment or history, is by design.
Oh, yeah, it's by design. I was on live today and somebody said, can you speak to Black people not supporting Black people? Yep. And I said, I think that's a very big generalization, but I also think it's important to realize that, like, as someone who sees it from myself as a person, as well as working with people from so many different walks of life and having that, able to do that, people are really just trying to survive. Like, you're making an assumption that, like, oh, they're being malicious, but like people are really just trying to get through the day. And I think by leading with this whole hard thought process of not thinking it's malicious, like, oh, they didn't support you. Do you think that was their intent, or do you think they're just trying to survive? Do you think that I just don't think people really realize that, like, like it's and people are struggling so much. Malicious intent is not, at least from us, I don't see it like that as often. I see it as like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to step on your foot. I didn't even see you there. I'm in a daze because I'm just trying to make it to 5 p.m.
I think that's right. And I often land in the space, probably see all of the above, which is often there's a distinction without a difference when people are processing in real time. I don't give a fuck about what you intended. What I know in this moment is that you stepped on my toe and now my foot hurts. right? Like I
that's very real too.
I don't care about the intention. What I know is that the outcome of this policy means that my trans child and I cannot leave our home because you now have incentivized our neighbors reporting on us in ways that I might be put in a prison.
Yeah, because intent and impact are in no way the same.
No.
And I see a lot of people get away with certain things with saying that that's not their intent. And I was like, well, intent is a you thing, right? Because you have to take the time to figure out why you're, your perception is like, say you stepped on my foot, right? Like you have to think about like, why are you walking around with your hands over your eyes? The intent is a thing you got to process yourself, but we got to deal with the impact of this, right? Your intent is an internal process. And if you have someone who wants to call you in and take all that, fine. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but we have to deal with the harm. We have to deal with the impact, like now we both in it, but that intent thing, that's something you got to figure out for yourself, buddy. You got to take the time to think about why you walking down the middle of the street with your eyes closed. You got to talk to your God about why you think that's appropriate behavior. But when you going to talk to me about the fact that I just got some new J's and you stepped on these Sean. Like we going to
That's right.
But Dr. David Johns, who sat here and turned my selfish moment into a teachable one, which nobody wants that. Okay. Nobody wants that. No one wants to learn all the time.
In community to get us what we want, beloved, but what we.
Not another one. Don't listen. I've met my limit. Can we
receive? I received.
Learning all day. Tell everybody where they can find you, as well as the amazing organization that you are doing all of these amazing things with and for and through and all that.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone for the gift of their time and attention. We can continue this in my space. I look forward to us doing this on the Teach the Babies podcast with me, Dr. David Johns. I'm at Dr. David Johns across most platforms, and NBJC, the organization I'm honored to quarterback as a chief Rustinet by Rustin, to be more precise, can be found at nbjc.org, across platforms at NBJC on the move. And my hope is that we can be a resource to you. And if there's something you need but don't see, that you will let me know so we can fill that gap and support you in your advocacy, organizing, growth.
Well, y'all heard it here first. Thank you so much. What days do you drop new episodes?
So class is in session every Tuesday. That's when we drop new episodes. And because I needed a container for some of this election conversation, we have office hours, which launch on Thursdays. So you can catch
bonus.
Right.
All right.
That's twice a week for a couple of weeks, at least through the upcoming presidential election.
All right. So you get double. That's what's up. So y'all can catch up on all these back episodes, and then you can be ready for Thursday episodes too. That's what's up. How you find the time, I have no idea, but okay. Okay.
Time is a construct. I try to leverage.
Time is a construct.
I leverage the same tools I talked about as an advocate and organizer to get it all done, like Beyonce.
Like Beyonce. Oh, I love her. But okay. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your week.